Going to go straight to Stephen. You can see him there, waiting in the wings for business. The pound we're going to talk about now. Best day in 8 years on Monday. How's it trading today, Stephen?
Yeah, sterling rose by more than 2% on Monday, above $1.47. It was the biggest one-day gain since 2008, driven by those latest polls that show an increase in support for staying in the European Union. This is the picture on the currency markets a short time ago. The pound, again, up slightly on the day, over that $1.47 mark, holding on to those gains that we saw on Monday. So confidence remaining in the currency markets today as well. On the stock markets, we had a day of gains across the European markets yesterday. We're seeing a bit of a retreat from that today in trading, but not anything like wiping out the gains yesterday, where most of the markets were up by about 3%. You can see London's FTSE 100 down by 0.8% there in trading. In Asia today, the optimism carrying over in Japan, the Nikkei in Tokyo up over 1%, but some falls in Shanghai and on the Sensex in Mumbai.
Now, meanwhile, the world's most famous currency speculator has warned of a Black Friday. Now, this is if Britain votes to leave the European Union. The
billionaire investor George Soros says a Brexit would trigger the worst day for sterling in more than 25 years. Writing in the Guardian newspaper, he says the currency would plunge by more than 15% and would affect every household in Britain. He sees the pound dropping to $1.15, or around parity with the euro, if the UK votes to leave. George Soros also says such a move would be much more damaging than the last time that sterling plunged in 1992, and that's because the central bank has a more limited capacity now to cut interest rates than it did back then.
Brazil now, there's been some relief for Rio de Janeiro's debt crisis.
The state's been given an emergency loan of a reported 3 billion reais, or almost 800 million euros. Rio declared a financial state of emergency on Friday and requested federal funds to pay for public services during the Olympic Games that take place in August. The government also announced that it would forgive some 13 billion euros in debts across Brazil's 26 states, as well as in the federal district of Brasilia. This, as Brazil suffers its worst recession since the 1930s. Kate Moody has the details.
Behind the bustling preparations for the Olympic Games, the state of Rio de Janeiro is facing an economic meltdown. Cash-strapped authorities declared a state of financial emergency last week. With the international spotlight firmly on the Olympic hosts, that prompted the federal government to spring into action. Brazil's finance minister agreed to extend emergency loans to Rio so it can ensure public services and finish construction projects before the Games, as well as granting a 6-month grace period on its federal debt.
Because Rio declared a state of public calamity due to a budget crisis, it needed special intervention. It would not be reasonable if this state of calamity blocked the Olympics from happening.
But it's not just Rio that's in trouble. Brazil's 26 states plus the federal district of Brasilia owe the central government about $126 billion. Under Monday's deal, they won't have to pay interest or charges on that debt until December. Payments are scheduled to gradually resume over the subsequent 18 months. The debt relief will cost the government about $15 billion over the next 3 years, an amount officials say has already been factored into budget plans. The country is facing its deepest recession in decades, made worse by high public spending and a drop in global oil prices. Interim President Michel Temer is trying to find a way out of the fiscal shambles, while also dealing with a corruption scandal and political crisis that threatened to cast a shadow over the Olympic opening.
Some more of the day's business headlines for you now. The Brazilian telecoms operator Oi has filed for bankruptcy in what is the biggest ever company failure in the country. Oi is the second largest provider of fixed line services in Brazil and has almost 17 billion euros worth of debts. It's now seeking to restructure its business after talks with creditors failed to provide a solution. And a Chinese supercomputer has been named the world's fastest machine. The Sunway Tahu Lite can reach processing speeds of 93 petaflops, which means that it can perform 93 quadrillion operations per second. That's more than 3 times faster than the previous record holder, but it uses less energy. It was named the world's fastest computer at a conference in Frankfurt.
What was that? A
petaflop.
Petaflop.
My word of the day.
Excellent. We shall remember that one. I'm going to talk about naked football now. Puma, they've investigated why so many shirts were ripped during France's Euro 26 match with Switzerland on Sunday. It felt a bit like naked football.
If you were watching, there were at least 4 Swiss players who saw their shirts torn during the match, forcing them to change 3 times in the first half. Puma now says it's traced the problem to a batch of defective material that was used in what it says was a limited number of Switzerland's home jerseys. The sportswear maker found that the thread had been damaged during production, which made the shirts weaker. Now it says it's checked the kit of all the Puma teams to make sure that it doesn't happen again, but it was quite dramatic at the time. Yeah. And wasn't that rough that you think that was why their shirts were all ripping?
Just testing my
sheer force of effort.
I think it's all right. It's not made by Puma. I think we'll be all right. Thanks, Stephen. Stephen and Carol there with Business on France 24.